We're rolling. Welcome to the REI Rookies Podcast, the Real Estate Investing Rookies Podcast, episode number 112, where we invite you to follow us on our journey towards financial freedom using the power of real estate. I'm Josh Koth, and Jack Haas is off tending to his live chickens. Here at REI Rookies, we believe in a couple key principles. Number one, the best way to retain information is by teaching it to others. And number two, a rising tide lifts all boats. We're not competitors, we're a community. So let's get into some real estate investing. All right, everybody, this week, Jack interviews Jeff Schechter, also known as Shecky. He's a turnkey provider down in Indianapolis. So they talk about investing. He's been doing it since the 80s and was house hacking before that was even a term. So check out Jack's interview with Jeff Schechter.
Well, Jeff Schechter, aka Shecky, is on the line with us today, and I've already done a brief introduction here, Shecky, but can you give us a little idea as to what you do, where you're located, and how you got into real estate investing?
Well, thanks, Jack. I appreciate being on the show. And my history with real estate's actually a fairly long one. So back in even in the middle 1980s, late 1980s, I was doing some house hacking in my own homes prior to that term even being something that was thrown around as often as it is today. So that was my first foray into, I guess, some additional forced appreciation. And then in the mid 2000s, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life and had lots of different businesses. But in the mid 2000s, I also had a flipping business down in Texas. And that went pretty well for a couple of years, but that company got off the ground in 2006. And we all know what happened in 2008. So at that point, I pretty much got my ass handed to me on a silver platter and lost everything I had and started over. And then most recently, about 3 years ago, I moved from Austin, Texas up to Indianapolis because it's a really, really strong market here. And my business partner and I started a very successful turnkey company because we had already been buying a couple properties here and there. Even though I had sworn off real estate, the returns were too good and the things that we were seeing in this market were just too hard to ignore. So, we started with one toe in the water, but eventually we built out a very, very successful turnkey operation.
Sure. So, there seems to be a pretty wide range when people define turnkey. Can you define that for us with what you're talking about there?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's honestly the source of so many arguments because that's probably one of the most bastardized words there are in the whole, ball of real estate investing. So in our world, a turnkey operator offers you a complete end-to-end solution. So in our world, in fact, we go out and acquire the property on our own dime. We rehab a property on our own dime. We have it inspected. We get everything going. We get a tenant in there and get it performing. We manage it. And then and only then is it sold to an investor who's looking to work with a turnkey company. So they're essentially taking none of the risk up front, none of the risk of buying wrong, none of the risk of rehabbing wrong. We even offer a warranty on our product. And then we're also managing it for them so that as a result, it's the same company. Like we have a lot of skin in the game and it's our, we feel our obligation and our ethical duty to do everything we can to make sure that the investor continues to perform on that property. Mm-hmm. So that's our definition of turnkey. Pretty much you're going to find a lot of other definitions that incorporate a lot less than that amount of effort, but that we're going all the way on this one.
So, you talk about Indianapolis. Is there, what level of properties and neighborhoods are we dealing with here? Is it typically A, B, C? And what kind of tenant do you usually get in for those?
Yeah, so there's A, B, C, and D in Indianapolis, just like any other big city. One of the things we saw is across the board in any property class, we have much lower pricing than a lot of other parts of the country. Mm-hmm. But most notably, the price to rent ratios are what we saw were really, really attractive. And especially in C class. So, again, when you have discussions of property class, obviously that's going to be somewhat subjective. But in our world, a C class property is typically, $45,000 to $75,000 price point. It's more inner city stuff. It's not that pretty necessarily, but it performs really well. The type of tenants that we get in C-class property are typically, low to middle income people. They are, question they're living hand to mouth. And, obviously more like service type workers or blue collar or things like that. But, so we're going to see rents in those price points anywhere in the, $600 to $900 range. And the ratios just work really, really well for really strong returns.
So you're usually at least exceeding that 1% rule everybody's aware of.
Oh yeah. And that, obviously that can be fudged too, but when we show all the numbers to our investors, we have what's called a CFO sheet, cash flow opportunity. And we actually go and put, anticipated, what's the kitty for future repairs. And we get actually an insurance quote because we have a great provider that we work with. And we actually research the taxes. So we know what the taxes are on the property. So when the investor is actually looking at a particular property from us, they're seeing how that property is performing right now. Like it's just a stamp in time. And that tends to work really well. So yeah, we're all over the 1%. In often cases in gross numbers, we're probably more like at 2%. But most notably, we try to, after all expenses, achieve a cash on cash ROI for our investors realistically in double digits. So, like at least 10%. There are some exceptions depending on neighborhood, but most of our stuff performs in the 10 to 12% range.
Sure. So, I'm going to have to ask this, and we chatted briefly about this, but since you're in Indianapolis, there was pretty big, it's made even national news. I think it was New York Times or something like that, where a former Fox News host kind of disrupted the market down there. How has that been?
Well, it's been really, really problematic, and it's been very, very challenging for our company as well. Early on in our career, we were actually buying from the same supplier for a very brief period of time. And even just in those 4 or 5 months, the investors that bought those properties through us obviously have had a very, very challenging time. So we took it upon ourselves to make that right with those investors. And it's taken a long time and a lot of money and a lot of heartache and a lot of extra staff and team members. Jack, not you, Jack, my business partner, and myself, obviously did not have any kind of legal obligation to do that. But we felt an ethical obligation to our investors. And so we've spent a lot of money that we weren't really planning on spending. And at the same time, we were seeing the rise of this other individual and what was going on. And we just were like, yeah, we're not going to participate in that. Like, that is just not the kind of business we want to build. It's not the kind of people that we want to be involved with. And subsequent to that, what was really horrible and really great at the same time is it forced us to look at all of our own processes. So we then went out, and although we worked with a couple other property management companies after that, we just ultimately decided that if we were going to really truly be successful and be truly turnkey per the definition I just gave you, we were going to have to own and operate our own property management division. And ultimately, we will probably also have to have our own construction company. So that's was not something that we bargained for when we originally got started. But, you could say the universe is very kind or whatever, or very mean. But, it was really, really challenging. But what's happened as a result of that is we've just got a really, really strong company, and we've even with all the heartache, we've built just an incredible team. And I'm just very blessed to not just my business partner, but the other people that have come on board and saw the vision of what we were building. It's been fantastic.
Sure. Well, no, I appreciate your insight on that and your honesty associated with, it couldn't have been a good situation. And it seems like we know some people down there and they're still trying to recover from some of this. If somebody was, since you're a turnkey provider and I'm sure you're working with a lot of out-of-state investors, do you have any advice for those people who would be considering out-of-state investing? Like, what should they be asking their turnkey provider?
Well, some of these people got into trouble. It wasn't just because you had people that were less than honest selling. Some of the problem there, Jack, is also on the buyer side. So I believe that every investor has to really take responsibility for their own actions. Mm-hmm. So for example, although we provide this, not necessarily all providers do this, is at a very minimum, why would an investor buy a property that's not yet rehabbed? And there was a lot of that going on. And we did that too early in our career too. And we learned very quickly that wasn't serving anybody, wasn't serving us either. But why not just buy a property that's already finished and buy a property that most notably is inspected by a third party? Because that's the rubber stamp on everything. Even in C class, I mean, we don't do the 40 pagers, we do kind of what they call a 5-point, which really covers all the major operating systems of the property. But so when an investor can see that and see, okay, this property is really in good shape, then that's a big piece of their due diligence. I mean, sure, you want to look at streets and, come visit and, build relationships and all that other kind of stuff. But the onus is certainly on the investor to make sure they do a thorough check. So some providers are going to give you what you need to make that easier, like us. And some are more fluffy, and I've seen pro formas from other turnkey companies where they'll go 20 years out and they're looking at, they're throwing appreciation into there and they're throwing, increased market rents. Well, how do you know that? I mean, certainly we can make an assumption that things might appreciate or we might get greater rents, but that's not due diligence. That's fluffy. So I think the investor really needs to not be super starstruck by like, oh my God, this is such an amazing deal because, two numbers look really great at the top. But, what's property condition? How is that property performing right now? What kind of management is in place? Because if you're investing long distance, let's face it, anybody can go out with enough research and find a good deal on a property with enough research. But where you're, if especially in terms of buy and hold, where your profits and returns are going to come is over time. It's over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And there's only two things that speak to the performance of that property. One was the original quality of the rehab, which we talked about, which the inspection will flesh out. And two is the quality of the management. Because, a good property will attract a better tenant, but then that tenant needs to be managed correctly. Mm-hmm. And as long as you have those two big things in the equation, you're way ahead of the curve.
Sure. So with that now, since you guided us through like how to talk to and what kind of information you should expect from a turnkey provider, how about property managers? Like in long distance relationship like this, how do you vet a good property manager out?
Well, I would just ask some basic questions. So the first off, we talked a little bit about property class, and I want to give you a little nuance here because managing an A or a B class property is different than managing a C class property. So you can imagine when you get down into the lesser price rents, that you're going to have higher collection efforts. You're going to have more really BS to deal with the tenants. But then again, there's less amenities that you have to provide. So there's a trade-off. So the first question I would ask the property management company is, what is your experience in the property class whereby I'm looking to invest? So, in other words, don't hire a property management company that has no C-class experience if you're looking to buy C-class properties, and vice versa. If you're looking to buy B-class properties, you don't want a C-class type management company. It's just not a good fit. Secondly is, how long, basic stuff. How long have you been in business? What kind of tenant screening criteria do you use? Do you have any kind of, online portal where I can see activity? Do you have a sort of benchmark that I can, give you a little, like an investor who's passively from out of state? We tend to have an arrangement in our contracts that there's like a $400 blank check. And what I mean by blank check is that any issues or maintenance or things that have to happen to a property don't require permission on the part of the property management company. They just go take care of it. And anything up to $400 just gets taken out of, the next month's proceeds. And it just shows up on the owner statement. So you can set whatever threshold you want, but that's just an important question for the property management. And so you're really just looking at expectations. What's the preferred method of communication? So like for us, yeah, certainly we'll take phone calls and emails, things like that, but we also have an investor portal. So investor can go on and look and see activity on there anytime they want. And if they can't sleep at 3:00 in the morning and, want to look at, old, income statements and maintenance stuff, they can do that at their leisure. So those are just, basic, good, smart, practical questions.
Sure. So, I know a lot of people, they're working full time and turnkey properties is really appealing, but I don't know. I frankly, I don't think I've ever heard anybody kind of go through the process, and I hate to step back at this point in the conversation, but could you walk us through the whole process? Let's say somebody is interested in a turnkey property with you. What's the process? They contact you and then you identify the property. How does that whole sales process or that pipeline work?
Yeah, and it's a great question. And just to back up a step, the because you said about people, busy and work and all that kind of stuff, and I think turnkey a little bit gets a bad rap because there's people that go, well, you can get so much more forced equity and make so much more money if you do it yourself. And that's probably true. I mean, it's not necessarily more money. It's maybe the same. In our case, because we're in the lower price properties and we've got things so dialed in, we've had other investors come from out of state that want to try and do what we do. And it's like, great, buddy, go for it. Work with contractors, figure it out. And they will rarely end up in properties for any less money than what we sell our investors to. And obviously we're selling fully inspected and warranted properties. So I've always said to my business partner, we're really in the business of trust. And so we just try and show as much transparency. I'm segueing into your question because that's a lot of what we do with our investors. So typically an investor will find us in a real estate forum like Bigger Pockets because we happen to be fairly active there, or we got a referral from another investor, or we have a fairly well-traveled website and we rank for a lot of pretty good keywords in the turnkey space. And they'll go on and they'll see what we're doing. They'll look at our FAQs, they'll watch a little video, or eventually they end up on our property page and they see some of the returns and some of the pro formas that we put out there. And they're like, oh, this seems pretty good. So they'll fill out an inquiry form or they'll contact us somehow. And assuming that the initial little bit of inquiry, maybe just a sentence or two, seems like they would be a good fit for us, they will have a call with our investor relations team. And that's usually really great because we have learned that we don't really want to sell to everybody. We want to sell to investors that really get what we're doing and get the value that we bring. So to be completely transparent, some of it is we're vetting clients. But at the same time, we recognize they're vetting us too. So that call is really important from a standpoint of what are your investing goals? What kinds of properties do you want to be into? Because like I said before, we're predominantly in singles and C-class areas. So if somebody's looking for, a small multifamily in an A or a B, hey, sorry, it's just not us. We may come across something like that every once in a while, but it's going to be the exception rather than the rule. So we tend to be really good about staying in our lane, and that creates some consistency, and we make that very clear on that call. We will then send them a standard investor packet, assuming that it seems like a good fit. And the packet includes all of our standard contracts that they can review. It's the same for any property that they buy. It shows all of our process. How do we handle things? How do we handle taxes? Here's what our purchase agreement looks like. Here's what the property management agreement looks like. So very contractually, very much going in, what it's like doing business with us. And then if indeed you're inquiring about a particular property, there's a packet specific to that property too. And that packet will include, obviously, the scope of repairs, what we did to the property. We don't necessarily put, dollar amounts on there, but we just give you a laundry list of everything that we did. There's a checklist there that shows we did all of our safety checks. And then they get the inspection, the final inspection, so they can see, obviously that the property is in great condition. And if indeed there were any items that were missed on the inspection, at the end, and sometimes there are, we don't catch everything. And sometimes there's stuff that a nitpicky inspector will mention that's really doesn't need to be repaired. It's not going to be meaningful towards the value of the property or the functioning of the property or in getting a good renter. It's not going to matter one bit. So in some cases, we're not going to do that. But for the final repairs that are indeed meaningful, we will send one of our team members back out there, and there will also be a sign-off sheet saying that was taken care of, and they sign off on that. And if we get really lucky when they were there, they're taking pictures, and they even have photo evidence. And of course, we have before and after pictures, all that stuff. So everybody's seeing everything, copy of the warranty, language, that's one of our contracts too. And so they're able to make a decision very, very quickly because we've just laid everything out for them. They see how it's performing. It's already rented. So they're seeing how it's performing. They're seeing what the anticipated vacancy rate is going to be, because we include that in the calculations. And we even have a little calculator that we just devised with a little slider on it. So the investor, as they're doing their due diligence, can, if, hey, you want to put in, we put in 5% every month of the rent for future repairs, you should put that aside in the kitty. But if you want it to be 10%, just move that button on the slider and you'll see how that affects the cash on cash ROI. And it's just a really, really straightforward approach. And, we've had investors that go, well, no, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that. Okay, good luck to you. No big deal, because we have really, really amazing deals and we sell everything we get. And usually 10 minutes later, that property is sold to somebody else. So we're in a situation, because we've standardized everything and have those processes, our sales process is actually probably the easiest thing that we do is making stuff available to our buyers.
So this calculator you're talking about, is that on your website, or is it
it will be shortly.
Sure.
We've had some pretty decent growth recently, and I like to joke around that we broke the internet. So our website, which was great, it was fantastic, and it served us really well the last year and a half, was just starting to develop some technical cracks. And there were things that we just didn't like about the way some of the data was getting processed and the way things were getting served up. So we have a brand spanking new website that actually looks very similar to the old one, but it's got a much stronger backbone and technology behind it. And we are, as we speak today, the loading of that calculator is going to have its own page on our website. So
sure.
I don't anticipate that being more than another week or two out until that's complete.
Sure. So can you give me a snapshot of what one of your C-class properties looks like when it's complete? When you're done rehabbing it, are you talking about, are you replacing furnaces? Are you putting in new flooring? Is it just paint? Like, how do you make it renter ready in Indianapolis?
Okay, so you're speaking to process, and I'm going to go out there and say, in no way, shape, or form are we just putting lipstick on a pig.
Yeah, and that's you caught me. That's where I was going.
Yeah, and that happens a lot, right? And it's sometimes easy to hide stuff when you put pretty paint and molding in something, but you haven't really addressed all the major systems that are going to be the most costly. So we go through everything. We have like a 41 or 42 point checklist. We check every plug, we check every piece of plumbing, we flush the toilets, we look at dates on hot water heaters and furnaces, things like that. So if a hot water heater is functioning well, obviously we're going to leave it alone. If it's 10 years old or older, we're just going to replace it, even if it is working well, because it probably doesn't have that much life left. Same thing with a furnace. They tend to have, a good furnace is going to have a 20-ish year lifespan. So if it's working fine up until 15 years old, we leave it. If it's got a date stamp on it more than 15, even if it is working fine, it gets replaced. A lot of the old galvanized plumbing, just as a matter of course, we're just replacing with PEX, because there's less issues with that stuff, and it's flexible and much easier to work with and much less prone to leaks and getting rusted out and all that other kind of stuff. So we go through a pretty thorough check, and like I had maybe mentioned earlier, we actually bring in an inspector when we first acquire the property. So in addition to our own checklist, we're also looking at that third party just to catch anything we didn't miss. So maybe there is, for example, a foundation issue that we didn't necessarily see when we acquired the property, or it wasn't really visible to our guys, and that happens. And in most cases, it doesn't require some big, huge, foundation company to come out. I mean, we have a lot of expertise with that, and we can dig underneath the house and adjust the piers and, get everything level again. Mm-hmm. But the initial inspection really just brings out things that we just want to make sure. So that's the structural, mechanical part. The cosmetic part, once we get going to, making a property ready for a tenant, we're going to use neutral paints. We will do carpeting if, it warrants it. Like if it's got carpeting throughout the house that's in really, really good shape, and it just needs a little more carpeting here, we'll probably just do carpeting. But we find over time, obviously, the carpeting wears out. So, and it's, even though it's cheaper up front, it's got less longevity when the tenants start beating on it. So in many cases, we're doing vinyl plank flooring. And, we use the not very expensive stuff, but it looks nice. It's got that woody look, and always, nice, clean white trim. We're definitely using a lower builder grade cabinetry, and sometimes we repair and sometimes we replace. And, we're not doing granite countertops. I mean, it's Formica, but it's, it's nice, and it looks like granite. And, so, anything that's old and beat up and weathered, even little vanities in the bathrooms and stuff, we replace. Most of our more recent rehabs, we're even getting away from those plastic tub surrounds, and we're just spending the extra money to put in ceramic tile. And yes, it's a little bit more money and it's a little bit more work, but it's just a couple of those. Getting a property that looks nice and clean just tends to attract a better renter, and it tends to keep a better renter. Mm-hmm. Here in Indianapolis, by the way, we do not provide appliances. Mm-hmm. So, and I've had a lot of investors come to town that just, we walk into a property and they just scratch their head like, dude, how do you not provide appliances? Well, we don't give them a fridge. We don't give them a stove. And what ends up happening in this property class is they just provide their own. Mm-hmm. And so there's this whole sort of like sub-economy of secondhand appliance providers in this city that will either do rentals or sell you a nice, stainless steel package delivered for like $400. Mm-hmm. And the beauty of that is these are two items that can often be costly to an investor that the investor is no longer on the hook for. Mm-hmm. So it's worked out really, really well doing it that way. And then, us from a property management standpoint, it's just less crap that we've got to deal with. So it's a blessing all the way around.
So yeah, this sounds really intriguing. I mean, compared to some of the experiences or whatever I've had, I mean, it sounds like you're far more detailed oriented than most, especially regarding the inspections and the like.
Yeah, and honestly, Jack, that just came from getting kicked in the teeth 12,000 times.
It only took 12,000 times to learn.
Yeah, I mean, I can honestly tell you, we're kind of idiots sometimes. And, I know maybe I sound smart, but it's like every time we did something the old way, or selling properties prior to them being rehabbed, or not selling, inspected properties or whatever, we just got our ass kicked. And there was always problems, always.
Mm-hmm.
And so we learned, unfortunately, we learned the hard way that we had to standardize and do everything a certain way. Otherwise, we were just never going to grow a successful company, because prior to that, we were always just losing money. And not only does that not help us, but if we're not profitable, we can't continue to grow and provide, better solutions for other investors down the road. So
right.
it was, the old saying, necessity is the mother of invention.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it happened.
Sure. So, you've been doing this for a while now, and mindset is a big thing for me. So what is it that gets you excited and keeps you going on this? Like, gets you out of bed in the morning?
It's a great question. I'm very blessed that both myself and my business partner are very big into personal development. So, I'll do the conferences and, read the books. And, I also take care of myself. I mean, I take care of myself physically. I'm a bit of a health nut. Yoga, meditation, and we're in a very, very stressful business.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really feel a whole lot of stress, or rarely do, because I just manage it well. And we believe that we have really just a better mousetrap. We've built something that is very hard for many of our competitors to compete with. And or they do a good job, but they're not necessarily with the same returns or the same property classes. And we just believe that we're building something really, really amazing. We have a podcast too, and we have a YouTube channel too, and we're growing a big national brand. And I don't know, all of that just gets my entrepreneurial juices flowing. So and we've overcome so much adversity that many other companies would have gone out of business, and we almost did. And now it's, yes, we have adversity, but compared to what we've been through, it's like, that's just child's play now, It's so it's starting to get fun. And, we built a big enough company that we've got, some, like I said earlier, some really great team members that are very capable and really help all the processes move the way they should. And, that takes a lot of heat off myself and my business partner.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it's just, I think, everybody, the best advice I could give is whatever it is that gets you to your happy place. Some people love to read personal development books. Some people like the, rah seminars. For me, it's all of that, but I also think there's a lot of value in the power of association.
Mm-hmm.
And you can attest to this because you obviously also have a podcast, but there's some great networking involved when you have a podcast and you meet some other really sharp people. And so I just try to surround myself with people that are sharper and better than me.
Mm-hmm.
And, just people that have great attitudes and that are courteous and friendly, and, look at all the plus sides of things that are going on in the world. And my other big secret is I completely stay away from mainstream news. I just don't even participate.
That's funny you say that, because about 6 months ago, I did the same.
Well, good for you.
I just shut it off
20 years ago.
Yeah. And I've had people ask me, like, how do you know if anything goes, what's going on? And my answer has been, well, if it's important enough, somebody will tell me.
That's what always happens. Yeah. What always happens.
Yeah. It's just, that's interesting. So,
yeah, in fact, it's funny how people react. I was just away, and I was up in Canada visiting my sister, and my mom was there. And I know we started talking about some stuff with Trump, and there was some nuanced joke that I didn't get. And, they're like giving me a rash of shit because, it's like, oh, you're an ostrich. You got your head in the sand. And I'm like, how is this even important to me? I don't even care about this stuff.
mm-hmm.
I don't care that the left says this and the right says that. Like it's the media is just there to stir up the cauldron. They're not even, some of it is real news. I get that. But, unless there's something that affects me, my world, or something that's affecting my planet, that sort of stuff. Those are the only things that really are meaningful to me.
Mm-hmm.
I can't fix everything in the world.
Right.
So I can work on myself. I can help, our clients, and, I can tread lightly on the earth. I can take care of people around me, but I'm only one guy. I can only do so much. I'm just doing what I can to stay in my lane.
Right. No, with that, I think that's a great way to end the show. And I really appreciate your time, but I want to make sure, first of all, you have a podcast. What is that called?
Well, our company is called High Return Real Estate, and our show is called the High Return Real Estate Show.
Okay, great.
And, iTunes and Stitcher and all your favorite locations, it's all there. There's also a link to it on our site. And as you can imagine, our site is highreturnrealestate.com.
And I will make sure to include all of that information in the show notes. And Shecky, I can't thank you enough. It was a great opportunity to chat with you, and I hope I get to do so again soon.
Yeah, me too. Awesome, Jack. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you so much.
Hope you enjoyed Jack's interview with Jeff Schecky Schechter out of Indianapolis. Check out all his information on the show notes page. And remember, we've put a lot of effort into providing useful content, and if you found value in the show and have any interest in supporting us with a small donation, head over to patreon.com/REIRookies. If you have any thoughts or questions, shoot us an email at info@reirookies.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at REIRookies. And if you like what you're hearing, head over to iTunes, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It really helps other rookie investors out there find the show. And remember, get off the bench and get into the game. We'll see you next time. This episode is brought to you by FargoTurnkey.com. Do you live in a good cash-flowing market? If so, Turnkey isn't the best choice for you. You should buy in your market. If you don't live in a great market for investors, where can you find profitable cash-flowing properties? We love the Midwest, where prices are reasonable and the people are great. Ever heard of North Dakota Nice or see the movie Fargo? That's where we live. We personally invest here and have lived here all of our lives. How does Turnkey work? We find the property, we rehab the property, we find you a tenant and place you under the care of our local property manager, who we trust with all our own investment properties. I'm sure you have questions about how the process works and what to do next. If that's the case, fill out the form on FargoTurnkey.com, and we'll reach out to see if you are a good fit for our business. We have a limited supply of properties every month, so we can sell only to a few qualified buyers. See you at FargoTurnkey.com.
I don't like to tell a man what to do with his money, but if you ain't investing in property, then you're dumber than a dummy.
I'm not dumb. I'm smart.
Well, buy property. That's my advice.